The metallic screech of wheels on cold tile echoed down the hospital corridor like a melancholic mantra. It was Tuesday, 1:45 p.m., and the oncology ward hummed with its relentless rhythm, hurried nurses wheeling medication carts, worried family members whispering prayers in worn plastic chairs, and the ever-present scent of disinfectant that seemed to try to erase more than just germs. Sitting in her wheelchair near the reception desk, Mary observed it all with eyes that had seen too much. Her hands, etched with decades of housework and now trembling slightly from chemotherapy, rested on an embroidered handkerchief, the only item of value she carried on these weekly visits. At 68, she carried the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to find beauty even in life's harshest circumstances. The handkerchief was a gift from her employer of 40 years, Eleanor, a woman Mary had cared for from her early days as a housekeeper to her final breaths in a hospital bed much like this one. It was a piece of delicate Irish linen embroidered with tiny blue flowers that Eleanor had stitched during her recovery from heart surgery. To remind you, she had said at the time that even the frailest things can create beauty when cared for with love. Now waiting for her turn in the outpatient clinic, Mary held the handkerchief like a talisman. Not that she believed in superstitions, her faith was more practical than that, but there was something comforting in the soft texture between her fingers, a tangible reminder that she had been loved and respected by someone, even when the world around her seemed to have forgotten her existence. The line inched forward slowly. Ahead of her, a younger woman, dressed in expensive clothes and clutching a top-of-the-line cell phone, impatiently drummed her fingers on the armrest. Behind her, a middle-aged man flipped through a magazine without really reading it, checking his watch every few minutes with a dramatic sigh. Mary didn't judge their haste. She knew time held different weights for different people, but she watched with the patience of someone who had learned that some battles cannot be won with urgency. When her turn finally came, she approached the counter, pushing her wheelchair with measured movements. The receptionist, a young woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun, didn't even look up from her computer screen. "Full name," she said mechanically, fingers already poised over the keyboard. "Mary Santos Silva," Mary replied in a clear but gentle voice. "Medicaid card." Mary searched in her small synthetic leather purse, another heirloom from Eleanor, and produced her worn card. The receptionist took it without making eye contact, scanned the barcode, and returned it with an automated flick of the wrist. "Do you have private insurance?" "No, just Medicaid." That's when the dynamic shifted. The receptionist finally looked up, but it wasn't the kind of attention Mary had hoped for. It was a quick, impatient assessment, the kind that categorized people in under 3 seconds. Her eyes scanned the simple wheelchair, the clean but clearly patched clothes, the worn purse, and finally landed on the embroidered handkerchief Mary still clutched. "There are no Medicaid appointments available today," she said curtly. "You'll have to reschedule for next week." "But I have an appointment for today," Mary responded calmly, taking a carefully folded piece of paper from her purse. "Here's the confirmation." The receptionist snatched the paper unceremoniously, examined it quickly, and returned it with an impatient sigh. "That appointment was canceled. Didn't you get a call?" Mary felt her heart quicken slightly, but her voice remained serene. "I didn't receive any call, and I came from far away. It's almost a 3-hour bus ride from my town. There's nothing I can do. You'll have to reschedule." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Mary had learned, over months of treatment, to recognize when she was being pushed to the back of the line simply because she couldn't afford private care. It wasn't the receptionist's individual malice. It was a tired, overburdened system where dignity often got lost in the bureaucracy and the rush. But Mary didn't get upset. Instead, she carefully folded the paper and put it back in her purse. "May I wait here? In case an opening becomes available, I don't mind waiting." "There won't be an opening." "Nevertheless, I would like to wait, if it's not inconvenient." The receptionist sighed again, louder this time, and waved her hand toward the waiting area. "Do what you want, but you won't be seen today." Mary nodded, murmured a thank you, and rolled to a corner of the waiting room where there was room for her chair. During this entire exchange, at least a dozen people had witnessed the conversation. Some pretended to be absorbed in their phones, others flipped through old magazines, but everyone had listened. and everyone knew that something unjust had just happened. She settled into her corner and picked up the embroidered handkerchief again. Her hands trembled a little more now, not just from the treatment, but from the silent humiliation of feeling invisible in a place where her life should matter. But she didn't cry, she didn't complain. Instead, she began to gently stroke the embroidered flowers on the fabric, one by one, as if each gesture could soothe not only her own emotions, but also the tension that now hung in the air of the waiting room. Then, a woman sitting a few chairs away stood up. She was a distinguished-looking woman with elegantly styled gray hair, wearing a navy blazer that spoke of good taste without ostentation. She had observed the entire interaction in silence, and now she walked toward the counter with determined but non-aggressive steps. "Excuse me," she said to the receptionist, her voice carrying a natural authority that made the young woman look up immediately. "Yes, ma'am. I couldn't help but notice that the lady over there," she discreetly pointed to Mary, "has a valid appointment for today, but was informed she wouldn't be seen." The receptionist straightened her posture, clearly realizing she was dealing with someone different. It's through Medicaid, you know, the system is overwhelmed. I understand the challenges of the public system perfectly," the woman replied, maintaining a respectful but firm tone. "I've worked in healthcare for 30 years. I'm Dr. Carmen Oliveira, head of the oncology department at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. I was here accompanying my mother's appointment and couldn't help but notice that patient is being treated inappropriately." The impact of her words was immediate, not only on the receptionist, who became visibly uncomfortable, but throughout the waiting room. People who had previously pretended not to notice anything now stared openly, some whispering among themselves. "Doctor, I didn't mean to," the receptionist stammered. "I'm sure it wasn't intentional," Dr. Carmen continued, her voice remaining calm and instructive, "but I'd like to clarify a few things. First, oncology patients undergoing treatment through Medicaid have a legal right to regular appointments, and cancellations can only occur with immediate rescheduling. Second, a patient's socioeconomic status should under no circumstances influence the quality or speed of care. And third," she paused meaningfully, "that lady is not just a patient, she is a person who deserves the same respect and care that any of us would deserve." Before the receptionist could respond, Dr. Carmen continued, "I'll tell you something you might not know. A few weeks ago, at my hospital, we treated a private patient who arrived in critical condition. She had developed a severe post-surgical infection and needed immediate intensive care. Who do you think volunteered to stay with her all night, even though she wasn't a hospital employee? A woman exactly like that one over there, who was visiting her grandson hospitalized in pediatrics. She noticed the nursing staff was overwhelmed, saw that the patient was alone and scared, and simply offered to stay. She spent the entire night holding a stranger's hand, talking softly, offering water, helping with basic care. When I asked her why she was doing that, she replied, because if it were my daughter in one of those beds, I'd want someone to take care of her like that." The room was completely silent now. Dr. Carmen turned slightly so her voice reached the entire waiting room. "Do you know what I learned that day? That humanity doesn't have a social class, that compassion doesn't appear on a bank statement, and that some of the most noble people I've met throughout my career were exactly those the system treated as invisible." She turned back to the receptionist, but now her tone was filled with restrained emotion. "That lady over there isn't just waiting for a medical appointment, she's fighting a battle against a disease that doesn't distinguish between rich and poor. She woke up before 5 in the morning to catch the first bus, probably didn't eat properly to save money on the fare, and arrived here with the same hope that any of us would have the hope of being treated with dignity. And you know what else? I bet that even being treated this way, she won't complain. She won't make a fuss. She'll simply accept it and go home, because she's been taught her whole life that her place is in silence." The receptionist was clearly shaken, her eyes welling up. Some people in the room also showed visible emotion. "But today," Dr. Carmen continued, "she doesn't need to be silent, because there are people here who recognize her dignity and will ensure she is treated as she deserves. At this moment, allow me a pause in the narrative to share something important with you who are following this story. If you are touched by this situation, if you recognize the injustice we witness daily around us, I would like to invite you to be part of a community that believes that stories like this need to be told and shared. Subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell, because every week we share real stories of ordinary people who make a difference in the world. They are not sensationalist or dramatic stories, but authentic accounts of humanity, courage, and compassion like the one you are witnessing now. By subscribing, you not only support our work of giving a voice to the invisible, but you also become part of a movement that believes that small gestures can transform lives. And believe me, after hearing the end of this story, you'll want to follow many others like it. Dr. Carmen then did something unexpected. Instead of continuing to speak to the receptionist, she walked over to where Mary was sitting. She approached the wheelchair with the same care a doctor approaches a patient, knelt beside the chair to be at eye level with Mary, and said softly, "My name is Carmen. May I sit with you while we wait for your appointment?" Mary, who had observed the entire interaction in silence, with discreet tears running down her face, nodded. Dr. Carmen took a nearby chair and sat beside Mary. "This handkerchief is beautiful," she commented, noticing the embroidery Mary was still holding. "Did you make it?" "No," Mary replied in a choked voice. "It was a gift from a very special person. May I see it, if it's not too much trouble?" Mary extended the handkerchief, and Dr. Carmen examined it with genuine care, gently running her fingers over the embroidery. "These stitches are handmade, aren't they? It's an artist's work. Whoever made this had a lot of love for you, Eleanor. I cared for her for 40 years. She gave this to me a few months before she passed. She chose the right person to receive this gift. I can tell by how carefully you treat it." During this conversation, something extraordinary was happening in the waiting room. One by one, people began to show their support. The young woman in expensive clothes, who had previously displayed impatience, approached and asked if Mary would like some water or coffee. The man reading a magazine offered her his more comfortable chair. An elderly woman accompanying her husband commented that she had also had similar problems with scheduling, and that Mary was right to insist on her rights. The receptionist, now visibly moved by the situation, rose from her chair and approached the group. "Mary," she said, her voice quite different from its previous tone, "I've managed to get you an appointment today. Dr. Fernandez will see you in 15 minutes. Mary looked at her with genuine surprise. "Are you sure? I don't want to cause any trouble for anyone." "Absolutely sure, and I'm sorry for my earlier behavior. It wasn't appropriate." "No need to apologize, dear. I know you work hard and are always tired." Mary's generosity in immediately forgiving, without resentment or recrimination, touched everyone present even more deeply. Dr. Carmen leaned in and whispered something in Mary's ear, who smiled for the first time since arriving at the hospital. When Mary was called for her appointment, she rose from the wheelchair, which was really just to make transportation easier, as she could still walk short distances, and went to the doctor's office. Before entering, she turned to the waiting room and said, in a clear voice that everyone could hear, "Thank you all, not for the appointment, but for reminding me that there are still good people in the world." Mary's appointment lasted approximately 40 minutes. During that time, Dr. Carmen remained in the waiting room, discreetly conversing with some patients, listening to their stories, offering words of encouragement. She had canceled her afternoon appointments, telling her secretary on the phone that something important had come up. When Mary left the doctor's office, she carried with her not only a new prescription, but also a different expression. There was renewed hope in her eyes, a restored dignity in her posture. Dr. Carmen waited for her at the reception desk. "How was the appointment?" "Very good. The doctor said the treatment is working better than expected." that I have a real chance of a complete recovery. What wonderful news! Dr. Carmen, Mary took her hands. I don't know how to thank you for what you did today. I didn't do anything extraordinary, Mary. I just treated you as anyone deserves to be treated. For me, it was extraordinary. It's been a while since I felt seen, important. Dr. Carmen smiled, but her eyes revealed that she, too, had been touched by the experience. May I ask you a favor, Mary? Of course. Could I get your phone number? I'd like to follow your progress with the treatment, and well, I have a proposition to make. Mary provided the number. Intrigued. You see, I'm organizing a support group for oncology patients at my hospital. It's nothing formal, just people getting together once a week to talk, share experiences, support each other. Would you be interested in participating? But is it for private patients? It's for people, just people going through similar situations, who can help each other. Socioeconomic status is irrelevant. I'd love to, but I don't know if I could go every week. We can arrange transportation. In fact, I've already talked to some colleagues who live in your area, and they've offered to take turns giving you rides. Mary was too moved to speak. She just nodded, clutching the embroidered handkerchief to her chest. Before they said goodbye, Dr. Carmen said something that would forever be etched in Mary's memory. Today you taught me something very important. You reminded me why I chose to be a doctor. It wasn't for the diplomas on the walls or professional recognition. It was for moments like this, where I can use my position to ensure that extraordinary people like you are treated with the dignity they deserve. Doctor, I'm not extraordinary. I'm just an ordinary person. Mary, ordinary people don't carry embroidered handkerchiefs for 40 years as a memento of someone they loved. Ordinary people don't immediately forgive those who treat them badly. Ordinary people don't face a serious illness with such serenity and grace. You are extraordinary, precisely because you don't realize how special you are. When Mary left the hospital that afternoon, she wasn't just taking a new perspective on her medical treatment, she was carrying the certainty that her life had value, that her dignity had been recognized and restored by people who cared enough to act. The receptionist, whose name Mary learned was Claudia, apologized again as she passed the desk, but this time, Mary stopped, took her hand, and said, "Claudia, dear, we all have difficult days. The important thing is that when we realize we've made a mistake, we have the courage to fix it. You did that today, and that shows you have a good heart." 3 months later, Mary not only successfully completed her treatment, but became one of the most beloved leaders of Dr. Carmen's support group. Her ability to listen, advise, and encourage other patients transformed that weekly meeting into a true haven of hope for dozens of people. The handkerchief, embroidered by Eleanor, became a kind of symbol in the group. Mary brought it to every meeting, and whenever someone was going through a particularly difficult time, she offered it for the person to hold during the conversation. "It's the handkerchief of hope," she would say. "It carries the love of someone who has passed, but who still cares for us through the people we put in our path." Carmen often recounted the story of that day at the hospital to her medical colleagues, not as an example of her own kindness, but as a lesson on the importance of seeing beyond the appearances and socio-economic circumstances of her patients. That day, she used to say, "Mary taught me that being a doctor isn't just about treating illnesses, it's about recognizing the humanity in every person we treat. It's remembering that behind every chart there's a story, a family, dreams, fears, and a dignity that cannot be diminished by external circumstances." Claudia, the receptionist, was also transformed by that experience. She began treating all patients with the same attention and care, regardless of their economic status. Later, when she got a promotion to reception supervisor, she implemented humanization training in patient care for her entire team. "I learned," she would say in training lectures, "that our job isn't just to process paperwork and schedule appointments. We are, many times, the first face a patient sees when they arrive at the hospital at a moment of vulnerability. We can be the difference between someone feeling humiliated or respected, between despair and hope. A year after that day, the hospital implemented a program called Dignity in Care, directly inspired by the incident with Mary. The program included regular training on empathy and respect in care, as well as a direct channel for patients to report situations of inadequate treatment. Mary, who had fully recovered from her condition, was invited to speak at the program's launch ceremony. Wearing her best dress and carrying the embroidered handkerchief in a small new purse that Dr. Carmen had given her, she walked onto the small stage set up in the hospital auditorium. "I didn't come here as a victim," she began, her clear and firm voice echoing through the auditorium packed with doctors, nurses, and administrative staff. "I came as someone who discovered that true healing doesn't happen only through medication and procedures. It happens when we are seen, respected, and treated as human beings worthy of love and care." She told her story without drama, without pointing fingers or seeking compassion. She simply reported the facts and above all focused on the transformation she had witnessed in all the people involved. "What I learned that day," she concluded, "is that we all have the power to choose how we treat each other. We can choose to see only diagnoses and social classes, or we can choose to see people. We can choose to perpetuate indifference, or we can choose to plant seeds of dignity and respect that will blossom in places we can't even imagine." When she finished speaking, the auditorium was silent. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, but a reflective one, heavy with the awareness that each person present had the power to make a difference in someone's life. Dr. Carmen, who was sitting in the front row, stood up and began to applaud. Gradually, the entire auditorium joined in the ovation, but it wasn't just applause of recognition, it was a collective commitment, a silent promise that Mary's lesson would be carried forward. 5 years later, Mary continues to participate in the support group, now as a volunteer mentor for new patients. The handkerchief embroidered by Eleanor has passed through the hands of hundreds of people, each finding in it the strength and comfort needed for their own difficult moments. Dr. Carmen expanded the humanization program to other hospitals in the network, always telling Mary's story as an example that medicine goes far beyond science. It is, fundamentally, an act of love between human beings. And Claudia, she now runs a humanized care training center that serves healthcare professionals from all over the country. On the wall of her office, there's a photo from that day at the hospital, Mary sitting in her wheelchair, holding the embroidered handkerchief, surrounded by all the people who were touched by her story. Sometimes, the most profound transformations in society don't begin with large movements or government policies. They begin in small moments of mutual recognition of human dignity. They begin when someone decides to no longer accept that indifference is normal. They begin when a courageous person stands up and says, "This person deserves better, and I'm going to make sure they get what they deserve." Mary's story teaches us that heroism doesn't require superpowers or public recognition. It only requires the courage to treat every person we meet as if they were someone we love. It requires the wisdom to understand that our humanity is measured not by what we have, but by how we treat those who have less. And it requires the faith that small acts of kindness can create waves of transformation that spread far beyond what we can see. In a world that often seems to have lost the ability to truly care for one another, Mary's story is a reminder that compassion hasn't died. It's simply waiting, silently, for people courageous enough to let it blossom. And when that happens, as it did that day at the hospital, we witness not only the restoration of one person's dignity, but the renewal of hope that we can all be better than we are. The embroidered handkerchief continues to be passed on, carrying with it not only the blue flowers sewn by Eleanor, but also the tears,
smiles, and transformations of all the lives it has touched. It is a simple symbol of a profound truth. True love never dies. It transforms, it multiplies, and finds new ways to touch hearts and transform lives, one person at a time.